This recipe today I've been making for years. It's for a German grain bread. It's a beautiful bread. It's rustic and it's heavy and it's full of seeds and goodness. It's a really easy bread to put together. When I had a cafe, I put it on the menu as my avocado toast and people just loved it. It is a mix and a bake, so as soon as you mix it, it gets put in the oven, and within 60 minutes, actually from start to finish, you've got a beautiful loaf of bread. And the best thing about this is that I've converted it to gluten-free. And this gluten-free bread is way better than you find in the shops. And it's really easy to do, and I'm excited to share this recipe with you today, and this is how I do it. Now, because this bread is a mix and bake, and as soon as you mix it, you must put it in the oven, the first thing to do is preheat your oven to a hot oven, so 190 degrees Celsius with a fan or 210 degrees Celsius without a fan. And then get an oven-proof ramekin and fill it with warm tap water and put it on the bottom shelf or even on the bottom of your oven. And this will create a nice steamy, hot, moist oven. And the first one I'm going to make is the classic non-gluten-free loaf of bread, and it's so easy. So the tin I'm using is just a standard size bread tin, and I'll put the measurements on the website in the recipe. But this is a non-stick one, but even so, I just like to put a bit of oil on the tin, and this ensures that the bread comes out nice and easy. And I'll set that aside. Now I've got one huge mixing bowl here. Mike bought it for me because he was sick of seeing me struggle with the smaller bowls. I'll leave the cup measurements as well in the recipe on the website, but it's best to use the scales and use the gram measurements, to be honest, because this way of measuring the flour not only gets it exact, but it also aerates the flour. So into a big bowl, measure 400 grams of flour, and by just taking the flour out with a spoon, it's actually aerating it. And everything helps when you're making bread or cakes, but using the flour like this, as opposed to just dipping the cup in, it gives it a little head start. So 400 grams of plain flour, so just all-purpose white flour into a large bowl. And then I'm using wholemeal flour today, but you could also use seed flour or spelt flour. They work really well in this bread. And I'm putting 400 grams of this wholemeal flour in as well. But you can experiment with different types of flours, but I do suggest that have at least half plain flour. Otherwise, the loaf is almost too heavy and too healthy. Now to that, I add 3 teaspoons of salt. Now I've got instant dried yeast here, and that's what you need. If you buy this, keep it in your fridge. It lasts way longer. And you'll need 5 teaspoons of yeast. Now I'll leave the gram measurements for this on the website, but a half a cup of sunflower seeds, a half a cup of linseeds, also known as flax seeds. And if you buy these, keep these in your fridge. And a half a cup of sesame seeds. Mix that all around, combine it well, just whisk it all together. Now into a jug, measure 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and this contributes to the bread staying fresher for longer. And it also adds a nice little flavour, so 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And then take this over to the sink, and you'll need to fill it up to the 900 ml mark with warm water. And when I say warm water, the water has to be not too hot that you can't keep your finger in it, but warm enough so you can put your finger in it without burning. You don't want it too hot or it will kill the yeast, and you don't want it too cool or it won't activate the yeast. So as long as you can keep your finger in the water, that's perfect. Then simply tip this into the flour mixture and mix it well. Now, depending on the flour brand you use, you may need to add a little bit more warm water, but you sort of want it like the consistency of tile grout, if that makes sense. And once it's all combined, spoon it into your tin. With wet hands, just flatten the top a little and just run your finger lightly down the middle. This prevents it from having a funny shape. And the last thing I do before I pop it in the oven is just drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, not too much, and this helps it brown. And if you want, sprinkle over a few seeds. I'm just putting some sunflower seeds on top, and you can also add pepitas on top, or you can swap one of these seeds for pepitas in it. Pretty customizable with the seeds and the flours, this bread. Now, really important step here, it goes straight in the oven. If you leave this out and delay putting it in the oven, what will happen is it will rise and then it will collapse. So we want it to rise in the oven, and that's how easy this bread is. So pop it in the oven and set your timer for 50 minutes. And after 50 minutes, we'll check on it. It may need another 10 minutes, but we'll see then. And that's the bread. It looks pretty impressive, do you think? I think so. And when the bread's cool enough to handle, well, the tin is cool enough to handle, take it out and put it on a wire rack. And you can totally slice a bit now, but it's super fresh. But it tastes great just out of the oven. Or wait for it to completely cool and it slices easier. And now for the gluten-free bread. And if you've been following this channel for a while, you've probably realised that I myself am gluten-free. I've got a severe wheat allergy. But I usually just adapt recipes, and you know, it's pretty easy these days, except for bread. If you're gluten-free, you'll know what I'm talking about. Bread that you buy in the shop that's gluten-free, most of the time is pretty average, and you usually pay double the price for half the quantity. So I've been making this gluten-free bread for over a decade, and I really enjoy eating it, and it's really simple to make. It's based on this version with just a few little tweaks. Now, because this bread is a mix and bake, and as soon as you mix it, you must put it in the oven, the first thing to do is preheat your oven to a hot oven, so 190 degrees Celsius with a fan or 210 degrees Celsius without a fan, and then get an oven-proof ramekin and fill it with warm tap water and put it on the bottom shelf or even on the bottom of your oven. And this will create a nice steamy, hot, moist oven. So grab a bread tin. This is a 9.5 by 5.5 inch bread tin. And it's non-stick, but I still like just putting a little bit of oil in it and spreading that over the sides and the base, and set that aside. Now I'll leave the cup measurements for the flour in the recipe on the website, but I do prefer using grams for this. And the reason I prefer using grams is that it's sort of more exact, but also you aerate the flour. And what I mean by aerating the flour is that when you measure it, you're taking the flour in spoonfuls, and that creates some more air in the flour. And every little bit of rise helps when you're making bread or baking. This recipe uses 350 grams of just plain regular gluten-free flour. The next flour you can use I'm using brown rice flour today, but you can also use buckwheat flour or another of your favourite flours. So I'm just using 350 grams of brown rice flour as well. And the next ingredient is psyllium husk. And this is the husk in its natural form, it's not the powder. So you'll need 30 grams of that. And the next ingredient is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Then instant dried yeast, and this is best kept in the fridge, and 5 teaspoons of instant dried yeast. 3 teaspoons of salt, and I'll leave the gram measurements for the seeds in the recipe on the website. But a half a cup of linseeds, also known as flax seeds, and these are best kept in the fridge because they can get a bit rancid out of the fridge. A half a cup of sunflower seeds and a half a cup of sesame seeds. Mix that all together, and that's your dry ingredients. Then into a jug, place 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And what the apple cider vinegar does is it helps it to stay fresher longer and also gives it a nice little flavour. Now I've got pure maple syrup here and just 2 teaspoons. And what the maple syrup does is it lends some colour to the bread and also a little bit of flavour, but it helps it get brown. And now take this over to the sink, and we need to put some warm water and fill it up to 900 mils. And when I say warm water, the water has to be not too hot that you can't keep your finger in it, but warm enough so you can put your finger in it without burning. You don't want it too hot or it will kill the yeast, and you don't want it too cool or it won't activate the yeast. So as long as you can keep your finger in the water, that's perfect. Then add the water to the flour and mix it well. And this mix is a little wetter than the previous bread mix, and that's how it should be. And then tip that into the tin. Now it's really important that as soon as this is mixed, it goes in the oven, because otherwise it will start to rise and then it will deflate. And we want it to do all the rising and hold its shape in the oven. What I like to do is just put a little drizzle of olive oil on top, which helps with the browning, and just sprinkle over a few seeds. Now this takes a good 50 minutes in the hot oven. And we'll come back and have a look at it after it's done. And there is the gluten-free bread. And that took 50 minutes in the oven, and it's lovely and brown. So I'll just wait for it to be cool enough so I can remove it from the tin, and I'll let it cool on the wire rack. And that's the lovely gluten-free loaf of bread. And you know, this is the non-gluten-free one, so there's not much of a difference, to be honest. And I'll slice it up a little bit later and show you what it looks like inside. So it's the next day, because yesterday I was losing light and I couldn't film cutting the bread, but I did make another loaf of gluten-free bread, and Mike and I demolished half of it warm. But I want to show you what the texture's like and how it cuts right now. So first of all, I'll slice the gluten-free loaf, or a couple of slices, and when it's the next day, it slices so easy. And you can slice them as thin or as thick as you wish, but I think it tastes really good if they're sliced quite thin. The bread is very filling. And that one's probably a bit too thin. Mike says I'm the worst slicer there is. He usually slices the bread. Now for a gluten-free loaf, It's got flexibility in it, it's not dry, and it toasts beautiful. And even for a sandwich, and that's a lovely gluten-free sandwich. So this gluten-free bread, because there's no preservatives, it won't keep fresh forever. So I like to slice it all up, and then I either put it all in a large container, or I take 2 slices of the bread and I wrap them up separately. And then when I want a sandwich or some toast, I just take it out like that. And that's all there is to it. Now I'll slice up the non-gluten-free bread. Slightly different colour. But that also makes great sandwiches and beautiful toast. One thing the Germans can't understand with us Aussies is why we toast fresh bread. In Australia, we have a really big avocado on toast culture. And when I had my cafe, this is how I used to serve it. And the combination is delicious. And yesterday I made a big pot of beautiful chili jam. It's gone cold now. I'll have to warm it up and then bottle it. Either a little bit of Danish feta or Persian feta, but soft feta cheese, and some chili jam. Lots of it. Sweet and spicy this is. I've made a video about it. I'll link it at the end of this video in case you want to watch it. It's really yum. And there you go. That's how I used to serve it at my cafe, and people loved it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy this recipe if you try it, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. I'm going to give this to Mike. This is Mike. He's German. He spent the first 40 years of his life in Germany, and he gave me this recipe for German bread, and I've been making it for over a decade. And on our 3rd date, he actually made me a loaf of this bread, and I thought, what a romantic person he is. But it turns out, I think there's another 2 times you've been romantic since we've been together. But he's wonderful in other ways.
Just 2?
Yeah. And Mike, tell the people, darling, what you think of this German bread.
Well, I think, it's the best bread you can not buy, but have here in Australia. When I came to Australia, I was so disappointed in the morning if you want to go in the bakery and you want a nice, like a bread roll with salad and ham and cheese and stuff, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning, it's full of donuts.
But how about the bread in Australia? You don't like it much, do you? He doesn't like that white bread.
No, of course not.
But he loves Australia, just not the bread.
Just not the bread. It's spoiled.
And this is so easy, right?
It's very easy.
And a friend of his gave him the recipe, who's also German, and Mike's given me the recipe.
She found that recipe for the same reason, and I.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so she was German, wasn't happy with the bread in Australia, and she found that recipe, gave it to Mike, he gave it to me, and now we're giving it to you because a good recipe is meant to be shared. Yeah.